That morning, Diana Calloway walked into the conference room on the 20th floor, carrying a stack of folders and the kind of confidence that belongs to people who have never been wrong at the exact wrong moment. Isaac Vane stood in the corner of the room, a silver tray balanced in both hands, his eyes fixed on the projection screen behind her. He saw the error, clear as a crack running through the ceiling. $90 million. 3 lines of bad code. A trading session set to open at 9 the next morning. He placed the coffee tray down and opened his mouth to speak, and that was when Diana turned, looked him over from collar to shoe, and said, "You just make coffee here. Your job is done. You can go. If you think you already know how this story ends, keep listening." Because what happened next had nothing to do with revenge, and everything to do with what a man carries when no one is watching. Isaac Vane woke at 5:47, the same as every morning, before the alarm had a chance to earn its purpose. The apartment was 1 bedroom in Queens, the kind of place where the radiator clicked all winter and the kitchen window faced a brick wall so close you could count the mortar lines. But the light that came through the gap at the top was good in the morning pale gold, quiet, and Isaac had learned to find things worth keeping in whatever light was available. He filled the kettle and set it on the burner. Then he pulled out 2 mugs. One was tall and dark, a chip on the rim he had stopped noticing 2 years ago. The other was smaller, white with a faded illustration of a yellow duck around the belly. He measured out the coffee grounds with the focus of someone who still believed the small rituals of a morning mattered. He heard Luna before he saw her. The soft drag of her feet across the hall, the wheeze of the bedroom door, and then she appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing her dinosaur pajamas, and carrying Biscuit, a stuffed white rabbit, whose ears had been resewn twice. Biscuit had a left ear that sat slightly lower than the right now, and Luna had declared this gave him more personality. "Morning, Bug," Isaac said without turning around. "Is today Wednesday?" she asked, climbing onto the kitchen stool. Biscuit arranged in her lap. "Tuesday." "Good." She seemed satisfied with this. "Are you picking me up at 3? I will be there at 3. Promise?" "Promise." He poured hot water into her mug slowly, added cold milk until the surface turned the color of caramel. Luna accepted it with both hands, the way she accepted most important things in life completely, without qualification. She took a small sip and declared it perfect, which it was, because he had been making it the same way for 3 years, and he knew exactly where the line was. While she ate her cereal, Isaac stood at the counter and opened his notebook. It was a battered thing, spiral-bound, its cover warped from being slipped in and out of his jacket pocket over months of heavy use. The pages were dense with notation probability models, variance calculations, the kind of mathematics that did not exist for any current employer, that was simply the language his mind defaulted to when it had room to move. He reviewed a page, made 2 small marks, and then folded it shut and tucked it into his jacket before Luna could ask what it was. Not because he was hiding it, only because some things did not need explaining before 7 in the morning. On the walk to the school bus stop, Luna held his hand and talked without pausing about a disagreement she was having with a classmate named Henry over whether penguins were technically birds. Isaac listened with full attention and confirmed that penguins were absolutely birds and that Henry was wrong, and that Luna should feel free to cite this source. She found this deeply satisfying. He watched the bus pull away, her face appearing briefly at the smudged window, small hand raised in a wave. He raised his in return. Then he turned toward the subway, and the day began in the other direction. Vantage Capital occupied floors 17 through 22 of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan that was designed to look, at certain angles, like it was perpetually leaning forward. The lobby had marble floors and ambient lighting, and the kind of soundless, pressurized calm that cost a great deal of money to maintain. Isaac passed through the staff entrance on the ground level, badged in, and took the service elevator to the 3rd floor. The coffee station on 3 was what the building management called an amenity hub, a long counter of pale oak with 2 commercial espresso machines, a single-origin pour-over setup, a refrigerated case for milk alternatives, and a view of lower Manhattan through floor-to-ceiling glass that would have cost a fortune in any real estate context. Isaac tied his navy apron, checked the supply levels, wiped down the machines, and began the first batch. Carter Rhodes was the first person through the door most mornings. He worked building security and had been stationed at the ground floor desk for 6 years and had the settled authority of someone who had seen everything the building had to offer and decided most of it was moderately entertaining. He was a large man with a slow walk and a loud laugh, and he liked his espresso double with a quarter turn of oat milk, a preference he described as not being able to fully commit. "Luna have a good morning?" Carter asked, settling onto the stool at the end of the counter. "She's currently in a dispute about penguins. She winning?" "She is." Carter accepted his espresso and watched Isaac work for a moment. "You sleep?" "Some." "You ever sleep more than some?" "Occasionally." Carter shook his head with the weary affection of someone who had been having the same conversation for 2 years and had made peace with the fact that it would never resolve. He finished his espresso, dropped the cup in the return tray, and headed back toward the elevators. The floor began to fill. Analysts came through in clusters, ordered quickly, checked their phones. A woman from compliance asked for a latte with an extra shot and said thank you twice with the urgency of someone who had not yet had caffeine and was dimly aware of it. Isaac moved between machines with the efficiency of long practice, each movement deliberate, nothing wasted. He noticed things while he worked. He had always noticed things. It was not a habit he had cultivated. It was structural, the way certain minds categorize input automatically, without being asked. The 2 risk engineers who stopped to refill their cups at 11:15 every day without variation. The pattern of which floors placed the most orders before board meetings. The way the number 3 conference room, which faced the trading floor, had an oddly inconsistent occupancy schedule this particular week, suggesting something significant was being prepared. He was wiping down the far end of the counter when 2 analysts walked past without stopping, deep in conversation. "Model run finished last night," one said. Adrian signed off. "So the session opens at 9 tomorrow?" "That's the plan." Isaac did not react. He set the cloth down and moved back behind the machines. The word model had landed somewhere specific in his mind, the way a key lands on a table, a small sound, but distinct. Later, during the quiet stretch after the mid-morning rush, he was refilling the milk refrigerator when he caught the edge of the numbers on the dashboard display mounted near the elevator bank. It was a summary view, portfolio level, updated in real time. He had glanced at it dozens of times over the past year without stopping. This time he stopped. He looked for 4 seconds, then he turned back to his work. In his jacket pocket, through the apron fabric, he could feel the edge of the notebook. The building's large conference rooms on the 20th floor were reserved for senior leadership events, and Isaac had been in those rooms exactly 4 times, always to deliver, always briefly. The call had come through Giselle Park, who was Diana Calloway's executive assistant, a composed and efficient woman who communicated entirely in complete sentences and never asked twice. She needed full-service catering for an afternoon strategy session. The usual external vendor had a scheduling conflict. Could the 3rd floor station handle it? Isaac said yes. He loaded the service cart at 2:45, rode the executive elevator to 20, and was admitted through the glass doors by a woman with a tablet who crossed his name off a list without looking up. The room was already occupied. Diana Calloway sat at the head of the table, her jacket on, folders arranged with the precision of someone who prepared for meetings the way other people prepared for arguments. Adrian Holt, the company's chief financial officer, stood at the presentation screen, laser pointer in hand. 3 divisional directors sat to the left. 2 senior analysts sat to the right, notebooks open. A systems engineer Isaac didn't recognize sat at the far end with a laptop. The projection screen showed a portfolio allocation model. Isaac had seen such models before. He had built such models before, in another version of his life, at a firm 4 blocks away where he had worked 80-hour weeks and had been, by most measures, extremely good at it. He moved along the wall, setting cups at each station, maintaining the practiced invisibility that the role required. He did not rush. He did not draw attention. He worked from right to left, and when he reached the end of the table nearest the screen, he stopped. Not because he intended to, because the numbers he was looking at would not let him keep moving. The correlation matrix in the upper right quadrant of the model. The coefficient values. The baseline date range annotated in the footnote at the bottom of the slide. He read them in less than 3 seconds. the way someone who has spent years reading such things reads them without effort, without transition, directly into understanding. The model was using historical correlation data from a period of low market volatility, a standard, stable window, clean data, the kind of window you would use if the current market conditions matched that profile. They did not. In the past 48 hours, volatility had crossed the threshold. The entire risk calibration would misfire. The automated rebalancing sequence would trigger a cascading series of sell orders in the wrong direction across at least 4 major positions. The estimated floor of the loss, given current conditions, was somewhere between $80 and $95 million, and that was assuming the market moved cooperatively in the first 30 minutes. Isaac stood at the end of the table with an empty tray in his hands. He was still calculating the second scenario when Diana Calloway turned her head and saw him. She looked at him the way people look at furniture that has been left in an inconvenient place, not with hostility, exactly, but with a particular species of impatience that does not require a reason. "You're done here," she said, not unkindly, not cruelly, simply with the tone of someone stating an obvious fact to an entity that should have already understood it. "You just make coffee. Your job is done. You can go." A few people at the table glanced up. Adrian's laser pointer continued its orbit across the screen. The systems engineer did not look up from his laptop. Isaac looked at Diana for one moment. He looked at the screen one more time. Then he nodded, gathered the empty cups onto the tray, and walked to the door. The click of the latch behind him was the loudest sound in the hallway. He stood there for a moment, the cart beside him, the hum of the building's ventilation system filling the space where a decision had not yet been made. He had been in rooms like this. He had built things like that model. He had learned, in the years since he had left that world, not to carry what he used to carry. The weight of other people's numbers, the obligation of other people's problems. He had made a deliberate choice to put down those tools, not because he could not lift them, but because what he was choosing to carry, instead a yellow duck mug, a spiral notebook, a promise about 3 o'clock, was worth more. But $90 million was not an abstraction. It was a real number. It would fall on real people. He pushed the cart toward the elevator. And in his jacket pocket, he opened the notebook to a fresh page. He picked Luna up at 3, as promised. She ran out through the school gate with her backpack bouncing and her hair in a condition that suggested the wind had been involved at some point. She thrust a drawing at him before she had fully stopped moving a crayon illustration of 3 figures standing in front of a building that might have been their apartment or might have been a castle. It was hard to be certain. 2 tall figures and 1 small one. "That's us," she explained. "And that's Biscuit. Who's the 3rd tall one?" Luna considered this. "That's also you. From the future. With a hat." He studied the drawing as they walked to the bus stop. Future Isaac appeared to be wearing what might have been a sombrero. On the bus ride home, Luna fell asleep against his arm before they had gone 4 stops. He sat still and let her sleep, and through the window watched the city past the movement and noise of it, the restless arithmetic of its streets, and thought about a set of numbers on a projection screen that he had no obligation to think about. He thought about them anyway. After dinner, after Luna's bath, after the 3rd reading of a picture book about a hedgehog who kept losing his mittens, after the lights in her room were out and Biscuit was positioned correctly on the pillow, Isaac sat down at the kitchen table. He opened the notebook. He worked from memory, which had always been reliable for this kind of material, reconstructing the model parameters he had read in the conference room. It did not take long. The structure of these models was not novel. He had worked with variants of it for 7 years before Luna was born, and his wife was alive, and his life had a completely different shape. He laid out the correlation matrix the way he had seen it on the screen. Then he laid out the current market conditions beside it. Then he connected the two with the logic of the rebalancing algorithm and watched where it broke. It broke where he had expected it to break. The coefficient for mean reversion had been hard-coded against a volatility regime that no longer matched the environment. In a standard session, the algorithm would scan, calibrate, execute, but the calibration step had a flaw, not in its logic, in its reference point. It was like using last winter's map to navigate a city that had been rerouted since spring. The code that needed changing was almost certainly 3 lines, possibly 4. The fix itself would take someone familiar with the system approximately 20 minutes, assuming they knew where to look. Isaac wrote out the corrected version of the correlation input on the bottom half of the page, checked it twice, then sat back. He looked at the drawing on the refrigerator. Luna and two versions of him and Biscuit, standing in front of a building that might have been a castle. The future, Isaac in the sombrero, had an expression that was hard to read at this scale, but seemed possibly content. Isaac thought about what kind of man he wanted to be in that drawing. Not for anyone watching. There was no one watching. He thought about it for himself, which was the only way the question had ever made real sense. He picked up his phone. He had Giselle Park's number from a handful of prior catering coordination calls. He scrolled to it and typed a message. "This is Isaac Vane, third floor coffee station. I need to speak with whoever is responsible for tomorrow's trading session. I believe there is a critical problem with the risk model. I think this is urgent." He read it over, added nothing, sent it. He set the phone on the table and looked at it for a moment, then looked at the notebook instead. On the inside front cover, in handwriting that was a little different from his current handwriting, tighter, pressed harder into the paper, there was a line he had written 5 years ago, in the months after the accident, when he had needed reminders for things that should not have required reminding. Do the right thing, even when no one is looking. He closed the notebook. He went to bed. He did not sleep much. He arrived at Vantage Capital at 6:45, a full hour before his shift began. He went to the lobby desk instead of the staff entrance. The woman at the front desk was professional and attentive and gave him the kind of polite, impenetrable courtesy that professional lobby staff are trained to deploy against situations that fall outside the standard protocol. His name was checked against the employee register. He was confirmed as third-floor service staff. He asked to be connected to Adrian Holt. "Mr. Holt is in a preparation meeting until 8:30, the woman said. "He's not taking appointments." "I'm not asking for an appointment. I need to get a message to him about the trading session this morning. It's time-sensitive." She looked at his navy apron. He had not taken it off yet. He was aware of this. "I can pass a message through internal channels," she offered. He pulled the notebook from his pocket, turned to the page he had prepared, and tore it out cleanly along the spiral edge. On it was the core of what he had calculated, the correlation discrepancy, the affected positions, the estimated loss range under current conditions, and 4 words at the bottom that said, "Check the rebalancing module." He placed it on the desk. "Give this to Adrian Holt, please, right now. Tell him if he looks at the correlation coefficients in the rebalancing module, he will understand immediately." She took the page, looked at it with the expression of someone receiving a document in a language they did not speak, set it beside her keyboard, said she would do her best. He stood at the desk for 3 more seconds. Then he walked toward the service corridor. Carter was coming in for his morning shift and caught Isaac in the side hall near the security checkpoint, still in his street clothes, apron over his arm, moving with an energy Carter had never seen on him before. "You're early," Carter said. "I need to reach someone on 20. Carter looked at him. In 6 years of working the same building, he had developed a particular sensitivity to the difference between general urgency and actual urgency. He filed this immediately in the second category. "You can't badge through to 20 without executive clearance," Carter said. "I know, unless you're already in the stairwell between 20 and 21, which is not a restricted access point." Carter studied the ceiling tiles with the practiced neutrality of a man who had not said anything in particular. Diana Calloway takes the internal stairs from 20 to 21 every morning. Solo. Doesn't like the elevator when she's reviewing notes, usually around 7:50. Isaac looked at him. "I'm not telling you that," Carter said. "Obviously," Isaac said. Carter nodded once and continued toward the lobby. Isaac took the stairwell. He stood in the landing between floors 20 and 21 and waited. The building sounds moved through the walls, the distant rhythm of HVAC, a phone ringing somewhere, the compressed air of elevator shafts. At 7:49, the door below opened, and footsteps began ascending. Diana appeared on the landing. She was carrying a leather folio under one arm and a coffee she had gotten from somewhere else, because her own floor's service setup wasn't active this early. She stopped when she saw him. Not a full stop, a fractional one, the kind that precedes a reassessment. "What are you doing up here?" She was not alarmed. She was not pleased. Her voice had the quality of someone who dealt with unexpected obstacles by immediately calculating the shortest path around them. "I need 2 minutes," Isaac said. "I don't have 2 minutes." She moved to pass him. The rebalancing module in tomorrow's trading session is using a hard-coded correlation coefficient from a low volatility period. Current market conditions have shifted into a high volatility regime. When the algorithm runs the rebalancing sequence at session open, it will misfire on at least 4 major positions and trigger automated sell orders in the wrong direction. She stopped, fully this time. She did not turn around immediately. A breath passed, 2. Then she turned. "Say that again," she said. Quieter. "The loss floor under a conservative estimate is 90 million. If the market shows early session volatility, which current conditions suggest is likely, the number will be higher." She looked at him. Not at his apron this time. At his face. At his eyes, specifically, and whatever she was evaluating there, she did it quickly, the way someone reads a balance sheet and gets what they need in the first 10 seconds. "Follow me," she said. The trading operations room was on the 21st floor, a long, climate-controlled space with 4 large monitors per workstation and a central display array showing live global market positions. Isaac had never been inside it. It had the particular silence of a room where every sound costs money. Adrian Holt was at the central workstation with 2 senior analysts, and the systems engineer Isaac had seen the previous afternoon. When he saw Diana walk in, he straightened. When he saw Isaac behind her, something moved across his face that was not quite recognition and not quite comfort. "Diana, is this?" "Let him talk," she said. She set her folio on the table. "You have 2 minutes," she said to Isaac. "Use them correctly." Isaac did not apologize for being there. He did not explain who he had been before he was a man in a navy apron. He stood at the edge of the workstation and spoke in the plain language of someone who has reduced a complex problem down to its core and is no longer interested in the surrounding architecture. "Your rebalancing module is running a correlation matrix built on data from a stable, low-volatility window. Your footnotes showed January through March. Market conditions have moved outside that calibration window as of 36 hours ago. The algorithm uses a mean reversion coefficient that is hard-coded, not dynamically referenced. When session opens tomorrow at 9, the risk calibration will be operating from a fundamentally incorrect baseline and will trigger a sequence of sell orders that are directionally wrong for at least 4 of your major positions." Adrian's expression shifted. Not to belief to calculation. He was already working backward through his own review of the model, looking for the place where what he was hearing either connected or failed to connect. "We ran a full model review," Adrian said. "Under what conditions? Baseline stable? That's the problem." Silence in the room. The systems engineer had stopped typing. Isaac looked at the central display. "May I?" he asked, nodding toward the workstation. Adrian looked at Diana. Diana's expression had not changed since the stairwell. She gave a single, clean nod. Adrian moved to the side. Isaac sat down. His hands found the keyboard without hesitation, not the way someone learns a new instrument, but the way someone returns to an instrument they have played for years and simply hasn't touched in a while. The muscle memory of it. The specific weight of familiarity. He pulled up the algorithm log, navigated to the rebalancing subroutine, found the correlation input section. He read through it once, then scrolled to the specific block and read through it a second time. "Here," he said, pointing to the screen. This line, and this one at the bottom." He turned to the systems engineer. "These coefficient values are hard-coded as static constants. They need to be replaced with dynamic references that pull from the current volatility regime classifier. Do you have access to that classifier in your architecture?" The engineer, young, the kind of compose that had cracks in it under pressure, leaned forward and looked. "Yes, it's in the risk environment module. Then the fix is replacing 3 static assignments with 3 dynamic references. 20 minutes, if the access permissions are in place." A longer silence. Adrian said, "If you're wrong, we've introduced a manual intervention into a live, pre-session algorithm. The compliance implications alone—" "I know," Isaac said. He turned and looked at Diana directly. "If I'm wrong, the session runs as it would have run, and the only consequence is a modified log entry and an uncomfortable morning. If I'm right, and nothing is done, the loss floor starts at 90 million. Diana Calloway held the pause for what felt like a long time. She was looking at the notebook page Isaac had placed at the edge of the workstation, the one from the kitchen table, with the corrected correlation input laid out in his handwriting, neat and dense, and carrying the unambiguous confidence of someone who had checked their work. She looked at his hands, which were still. She looked at his face, which was not asking for anything. "Give him the access," she said. "Adrian, you verify every step before it executes. Nothing gets committed without your sign-off." Adrian opened his mouth, closed it. Understood. The room did not breathe for the next 23 minutes. Isaac worked left to right through the 3 problem blocks, reading each replacement aloud before executing so Adrian could follow in real time. The systems engineer confirmed each reference pathway against the risk environment module. One of the analysts pulled up a parallel simulation window to model the expected outcomes under the revised inputs. At 8:36, Isaac sat back. "Run it," he said. The engineer executed the simulation. The screen populated with updated projections. The room watched the numbers adjust smoothly, correctly, the model finding its proper footing in the current conditions the way a level finds its bubble after someone adjusts the surface beneath it. The senior analyst who had been running the parallel window said, in a voice that was working hard to stay even, the original model would have produced an estimated loss of 87 million in the first 30 minutes of session under current conditions. The room held that number for a moment. Then, from the direction of the door, Carter Rhodes, who had come up to check on things and was standing just inside the threshold pretending he had some official reason to be there, exhaled audibly. Adrian Holt sat down in his chair and rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. Diana Calloway said nothing. She picked up her folio and her coffee and walked to the window that faced east. The sky over Queens was the pale gray of early morning giving way to full daylight, and somewhere out there, in a 1-bedroom apartment with a good window light and a radiator that clicked, a drawing of 2 tall figures, and 1 small one, was pinned to a refrigerator door. At 9 o'clock precisely, the trading session opened. The corrected algorithm ran its rebalancing sequence without incident, and the 4 positions in question moved in the directions the model had intended. The monitors showed green across the primary display. The room's particular tension, a thing that had been present all morning like a change in air pressure, lifted. Isaac had left by then. He had stood up, thanked the engineer, and walked to the door. Diana had followed him into the hallway. "Mr. Vane." He stopped. It was the first time she had used his name, both components of it, with the inflection of someone who had bothered to learn it rather than simply remember it. He turned around. She held his gaze for a moment, before speaking. "What I said to you yesterday," she began, then paused. The pause had texture to it, the particular quality of a person who does not apologize often and is therefore not fluent in the mechanics of it. It was wrong. "I'm sorry." Isaac looked at her, not assessing, not calculating, just looking, the way people look at each other when the surrounding noise has dropped away. "Okay," he said. A short silence. "Who are you?" she asked. It came out simply, genuinely, without the authority she typically carried in her questions. "I'm the 3rd-floor coffee station," he said. She waited. "And Luna's dad," he added. "Which is the more important part?" She nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they receive an answer that is smaller and larger than they expected at the same time. "If you ever wanted to?" "I pick Luna up at 3 every afternoon," Isaac said. Not as a refusal. As a fact, offered clearly, the way you offer a foundation rather than a wall, that doesn't change. But if the firm needs someone to review the overall risk infrastructure on a project basis remote, mornings only I can do that. Diana looked at him for a long moment. "I'll have Giselle reach out today." He nodded. She turned back toward the trading room. He turned toward the elevator. He pressed the button for 3, rode down, tied his apron, and started the first batch of coffee. Carter came by 20 minutes later, took the usual stool, put his elbows on the counter. "Well?" he said. "All right," Isaac said. "That's it?" Isaac slid a double espresso across the counter. "That's it." Carter looked at him. Then he looked at the espresso. He picked it up, turned it once in his hand, and drank it with the reverence of a man who understood that some conclusions deserve to be savored. "You're a real piece of work, you know that?" Carter said, setting the cup down. "So I've been told," Isaac said, and turned back to the machines. 3 months passed, the way good months pass, with enough ordinary texture that the extraordinary becomes part of the ordinary, the way a scar fades into skin. Isaac still came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which were the days Giselle had scheduled for his project consultation work. He sat at the small table in the staff resource room on 12 with his laptop and his notebook and a coffee he made himself, and he worked through the risk architecture review at the pace of someone who did not need to perform urgency to produce good work. The engagement was clean, paid fairly, and never ran past 2 in the afternoon. He still tied the navy apron the other mornings, partly because the schedule suited Luna's pickup time, partly because he had come to understand that there was a kind of thinking that happened while his hands were occupied with something physical and simple, a kind of open processing, like a window left cracked, and that some of his clearest analysis happened between pulling shots and wiping counters. He did not feel the need to explain this to anyone. On a Thursday in early December, Diana Calloway walked past the third-floor station. The person behind the counter now was a young man named Marcus, who made excellent pour-overs and had strong opinions about water temperature. She stopped for a moment at the counter, in a way that suggested she had not quite intended to stop, glancing at the space where Isaac's notebook usually sat. She thought about the stairwell, about the way he had looked at her in the 21st floor operations room, not with the urgency of someone asking to be believed, but with the calm of someone who had already decided what they were going to do, regardless of whether they were believed. She had been in business for 17 years, and she could count on one hand the people she had met who carried that particular quality. She ordered a flat white from Marcus, said thank you, and continued toward the elevator. She had not told anyone what she had done differently the following week. There was no announcement, no policy change, no memo. She had simply started looking at people when she walked past them in the corridors. The person cleaning the glass panels at the main entrance, the woman who ran the mail cart on 14, the man who restocked the printer paper. She looked at their faces. She said good morning. She said thank you, not as a performance, as a correction, small, private, the kind that does not require an audience to be real. Some lessons do not arrive with fanfare. Some of them come in a stairwell, delivered by a man in a navy apron who is not asking for anything. On the last Thursday before winter break, Isaac was at the school gate at 2:58. He was always there by 2:58. Luna came out at 3:02, her hair in a state that suggested she had spent at least part of the afternoon in active disagreement with gravity. She was carrying her backpack with one hand and a folded piece of construction paper in the other. She navigated the stream of other children with the authority of someone who knew exactly where she was going. Bah! She reached him, grabbed his hand, and stopped walking all at once, which was something she did when she had important news. "We had an assignment." "Tell me." She unfolded the construction paper and held it out. It was a drawing in crayon, full page, deliberate, with the careful attention she gave to things she considered significant. A man with dark hair stood at a counter. Beside the counter was a laptop, and in one hand, the figure held a mug. In the other, he held a spiral notebook. To his right stood a small figure with a rabbit under one arm, looking up. At the top of the page, in Luna's large, careful letters, were the words, "My hero." The teacher said to draw someone brave, Luna explained, with the gravity of a scholar defending a thesis. "I drew you because you make coffee and you do the math." And Biscuit said, "You're the bravest." She held up the rabbit for confirmation. Biscuit's mismatched ears gave him an expression of serene agreement. Isaac looked at the drawing. He looked at it for longer than was strictly necessary at the two figures, at the notebook, at the mug, at the small, earnest handwriting at the top. He did not have a neat response for this, no line that felt equal to the weight of it. He crouched down to her level, took the drawing carefully with both hands, and looked at her. "It's perfect," he said. Luna nodded. She had expected as much. He folded the drawing once, gently, and put it in his jacket pocket next to the notebook. Then he stood up, took her hand, and they walked out through the gate together. The afternoon light was cold and clean over the street. Luna talked without pause about Henry and penguins, and a new development in the mitten-losing hedgehog story involving a fox. Isaac listened with his full attention. He carried the drawing in his pocket. Somewhere across the river, in a glass tower leaning perpetually forward, a trading session was running cleanly, correctly, on numbers that had been set right on a morning when it had mattered. The world did not know this. It did not need to. The numbers did not care whether anyone was watching. They ran true because someone had made certain they would. Isaac Vane had made coffee that morning, the same as every morning, and he had done the math, which was, as it turned out, everything.